I don't know if you all appreciate the way I appreciate what you guys do when you're in this room, right? When you're supporting the chamber and supporting each other. The way I think about it is there's that scene at the end of Schindler's List, right? When Oskar Schindler, who saved all these Jews during the Holocaust, was like feeling guilty that he couldn't save more. And he looked at his watch and he was like, I could have sold this. And he had a ring that he could, and then his accountant, Ben Kingsley, comes up to him and he goes, there's a saying in the Talmud, he who saves one person saves the whole world, right? And I think about that when I think about how business owners help each other, because, and we're involved in a lot of business organizations for that reason, because when I think about helping a business owner, I think about the employees that I'm helping and their families that I'm helping, right? So one little piece of advice that I can give to a business owner that saves them from a lawsuit, right? Saves them from being distracted for the next year and a half while they're playing with their kids, and saves them from having to lay off employees because they just paid this massive settlement. But it's the same thing for you guys. And it's definitely what you've been doing for almost 20 years, Steve, right? When businesses cross-pollinate and help each other solve problems, avoid problems, make money, there's a ripple effect there that transcends that one human and goes to their employees. And then that way down, and I've been thinking about this, I wasn't born in this country. I was born in Moldova, which is next to the Ukraine. And I was 4 when I came over, and my dad instantly became an entrepreneur. And I watched how his burdens became his employees' burdens, and how his wins became his employees' wins, and how that all had this ripple effect. So anyway, so I really appreciate you, Steve, and I appreciate all of you elected officials and appointed officials here that are supporting businesses, and all of you business owners that are helping each other for all that reason. It's really, really important. So thank you for all of that and for what you're doing. All right, so that's me. That's all the stuff I do. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I've been doing this for a while, and I did start my career just in litigation, just defending companies. And if you asked me, Alex, back then, describe what you do, you know what I would have said? I would have said, my job is to stress out the other side, and their job is to stress me out, right? That's what litigation is all about. It's all about stressing out the other side until they write you a check or you write them a check, right? And so what I learned as I've evolved into more of a leadership role in my law firm now is the lawyers will win every time, but our clients are always pissed. Even when we win and we knock it out of the park, the client still had to litigate. They still had to write us these fat checks. They were still distracted. They were still had all their laundry out there in the public domain, right? It just sucks being a litigant. So that's now where I focus all my attention, and that's what led us to write the book that's on your table. It is the playbook for staying out of court, right? I don't know why. Oh, there we go. All right, yeah. So a good lawyer wrote this for the lawyer's benefit. Everything you hear me say here is for the masses. You've got your own individual issues. You're going to want to talk to your own lawyer about everything that I say, okay? All right, here's my goal today. I want to educate you, I want to empower you, and I want to create massive value for you. And I mean massive, right? So that means going beyond what legalized weed means in your business, right? If you don't walk out of here with massive value that I've been able to create for you and your business and your organization and your stakeholders, your constituents, then I want you to stop me and tell me, Alex, I did not get massive value today, and I'm gonna find a way to create massive value for you. Okay, this is our agenda. My employees tell me that I talk way too fast, and my girlfriend says I talk way too much. So I'm going to talk way too fast, right? But you're going to get a copy of this presentation, and I will have to walk out the door like right after 1, but call me afterwards if you've got questions about this. I'm going to Steve Shimo, my partner here, is going to yell at me when I've got 7 minutes left. I'm going to try to land the plane, and if by some miracle there's time left over for questions, then we'll take some questions, okay? But this is what we're gonna go through today. Most of this is just gonna be about recreational, or as they say, adult use marijuana regulation in Ohio. But I'm gonna drop some knowledge bombs on you guys that zoom out, right? So most lawyers, when you go to talk to a lawyer, right? I'm sorry when you have to do that. It's never fun, right? But you're zooming in. You're zooming in on a particular problem that you need the lawyer to solve for you, right? I don't believe that's the way to practice law. I think you have to zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, right? Because you're not being paid and retained to just solve that one problem so that they can call you the next day with a different problem. The goal is to create more confidence, protection, and a better path forward so that they don't have to keep calling you every time. And this is how we do it at my law firm, right? We build tanks and forts for our clients, right? The fort is a 6-sided fort, and the tank is a way to keep them away, to keep them from coming to your fort in the first place, okay? So here's a knowledge bomb. Here's a fun fact for you that you guys can impress all your friends at parties with, okay? There are only 6 plaintiffs who can sue your company. There's no 7th plaintiff. I've looked for the 7th plaintiff under every rock for 22 years, and I've never found one. The only 6 people who can sue your business are these 6 people right here, right? And if you know that there's only 6 people who can sue your business, then that's your fort. It's a 6-sided fort. And your job is to optimize that relationship, right? Good legal protections, good employee handbooks, good customer contracts, right? By the way, show of hands, who is a business owner in this room? All right, good. And then are there any like HR managers? Oh man, all right, you guys are gonna call me out when I'm wrong about employment law, but I'm just okay. All right, good. So we built Cover My 6, and that's the playbook on your table, right? That is our system for keeping our clients out of court. And we build this 6-sided fort, and a lot of what you're going to hear me talking about today are here and here, right? Employees and the government. And to some extent, it relates to the owners and to the customers, probably not so much the competitors and the vendors. Okay, so in November of last year, the state of Ohio passed a bill that decriminalized marijuana for everyone 21 and over. Before that, you needed to get a medical marijuana card. You needed a prescription from a licensed doctor. But guess what? The United States government still considers marijuana to be a Schedule I drug, right? The same as heroin and cocaine and amphetamines, right? And that creates conflict. That we think is going to change, but today, that's a fact. Now, for years, the federal government hasn't really enforced that except in a couple places, right? There's something called the Drug-Free Workplace Act. There are federal contracts. If you take money from the federal government, then you have to comply with those federal marijuana laws. But if you are following the state's marijuana laws, In general, the federal government is probably not going to bother you. So today, so the effective date was December 7th. On August 6th, dispensaries started selling. So a few weeks ago, dispensaries started selling marijuana to anyone with an ID that said that they were 21 and older. The rule is that you can have up to 2.5 ounces and up to 6 plants per person, or I believe it's 12 plants per family. And as it relates to employers, guys, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You do not have to because of this law, and the law explicitly states this, right? You can say no marijuana will be used while you're on the job. If you want, you can say, I'm going to drug test you, and I will not allow employees who smoke weed, if that's what you want. If you're the employer and that's your culture, that's your belief system, that's the kind of business you want. Obviously, the social acceptability of cannabis might, weed out, no pun intended, your job pool. You'll probably lose employees that you might want to hire, but that's up to you. This law in the state of Ohio protects the employer to make decisions. Here's one way to think about it. Forget it's marijuana and think about it as alcohol, right? The state of Ohio said, hey, if you don't want to let people drink on the job, don't let them drink on the job. You want to fire them for drinking on the job or for being drunk on the job? You can do that. Same thing with marijuana. You are expressly protected as an employer from a disciplinary action that you take, hiring, firing, disciplining based on the employee's use of marijuana. So that's the employer right. You still cannot discriminate, right? You can't say, hey, Asian guy, you're not allowed to smoke weed. White guy, you can. Can't do that, right? Still can't do that. But if you want to make an across-the-board rule that says, listen, we're a drug-free environment. And by the way, again, if you take federal contract money, you may have to be a drug-free environment. And then we'll talk about other industries. But your rights are largely protected as an employer. And if you're not sure, just think of marijuana like alcohol. Okay? So what should you do? What should you do in light of this rule? Well, number one, you want to have clear policies, written employment policies. You want to communicate those policies and you want to train your managers. Okay? All three of those things are best practices regardless of this law. Okay? Here's a knowledge bomb about employee handbooks. Okay? If you are using an employee handbook that you got from your payroll company and you didn't have an employment lawyer review it, then after this lunch, I want you to go call an employment lawyer and have them review it. And I guarantee you, he or she is going to find things in there that either don't apply to you, or if they do apply to you, you're not following, which means that they're as good as not even being there, right? The last page of your employee handbook should be a written acknowledgement signed by the employee saying that they've received it, they've read it, had the opportunity to read it, had the opportunity to ask you questions about it, and they've asked you whatever questions they want. Signed employee, okay? That is really important. If your employee handbooks don't do that, do that. And these are just basic check boxes, right, for employee handbooks. But as it relates to marijuana use, right, if you decide, and I think it's probably a good idea, right, you want to, setting aside what you do outside of work, you can't come to work high. Okay? That should be clearly spelled out in your employee handbook and policies. As as well as here is our progressive discipline process, right? And it can be whatever you want, so long as it's clear, easy to understand, and consistently applied, right? If you wanted to say, hey, if we catch you high on the job, you're fired. If you wanted to say, hey, if we catch you high on the job, we have the discretion to fire you, but then you have to use that discretion consistently. If you wanted to say, hey, you will be written up and sent home, fine, right? But it needs to be clearly spelled out. And then accommodation is the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Which I believe under federal law requires 35 employees, but under Ohio law requires only 4 employees, right? And it basically says, and this is where there's a lot of questions that we get about medical marijuana, right? I've got really bad anxiety. I went to the doctor. Doctor gave me a prescription for medical cannabis because it's the only thing that will keep the demons away, right? And so I'm an employee and I just came to you and I said that to you, okay? Well, now you have to go through a process to determine whether you have to provide reasonable accommodations. And the process is very fact specific and intensive. So number one, and as a very general macro level overview, first you have to decide, you have to determine whether this is a covered disability. Anxiety isn't spelled out in the federal guidelines as one, but it could be if it impairs a key life function. Then if it does, it's not a bad idea to get a diagnosis from the doctor, right? It is also then if they ask for a reasonable accommodation, then you may give them one so long as it's not an undue burden on you as a business owner. And lastly, you do not have to make the reasonable accommodation be, hey, it's cool if you take cannabis during hours. That is not a reasonable accommodation. It's not, right? So that is what that process looks like. You know how you got to tell your kids something like 59 times to get them to listen to you, right? If there's anyone here that has figured out how to say something to their employees once and they will listen to you, find me afterwards and give me the Kool-Aid that you make them drink, because I haven't figured it out. But multiple communications about your policies through multiple channels. Email, internal, we use Teams, we have an intranet at our firm. Having Q&A sessions, I really like those like one-page frequently asked questions pages. And then it's not a set it and forget it thing, right? Especially because the cannabis laws, I mean, right out the gate, the Ohio Senate tried to gut the bill, right? And then they ended up compromising on different aspects of it. Where it all landed, it's still being debated. Even now, even though it's law now, there are still debates happening about how broad the regulations and the use should be. But the good news is, as it relates to employer protections, that part is pretty solid. Everyone in both the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate pretty much agree you don't want to mess with the business owner's rights here, right? So that's the good news. What we may see in the future is regulatory changes that affect the sale of marijuana, right? And the internal operations of dispensaries and cultivators, which probably won't affect employers that much. And I'll talk about descheduling a little bit later. This is this is a big change, right? So it's kind of easy to tell when your employee's drunk. It's a little bit harder to tell when they're high, right? Especially if you've got Visine, right? But if you are if you are, so one thing that's coming out a lot more now are these testing labs that, because marijuana stays in your system for 30 days, alcohol's out in like 24 hours, right? And depending on what your policy is and what your industry is, right? If you're like a nursing home, the individuals that are in direct contact with your patients, your residents, the elderly, you may want to drug test them. You might have to drug test them depending on the industry regulation, right? That's drug testing. Impairment, heavy machinery, right? If they're operating heavy machinery or they're doing anything that that impacts other employees' safety or their own safety, right? The foreman or forewoman or or other managers really need to have a fine-toothed weed detection system, right? And so there are labs that are popping up all over the place, and there's also certifications that you can take that will train you and test you on your ability to tell if your employee is high on the job. We talked about this a little bit already. Legal considerations. I guess the issue here is all three of these need to be topics A, B, and C in your management training program, okay, which should be intensive and should be regular. Again, same thing as employees, right? You're not just going to train your managers, talk about it once, and expect them to get it on the first try. It's got to be an ongoing thing. Okay, so I chose these 4 industries because that's a pretty good cross-section of the clients that we've got. Okay, and generally when I talk to groups like this, that's a pretty good cross-section. I don't know. I'm hoping that this is going to be helpful to you. But basically, so I just talked about this. The more contact, the more care that your employees have for other lives, the more likely you either are required to or should drug test them and prohibit them from using drugs anywhere near the job or anywhere close to the time that they're working, okay? This is another thing that is changing regularly with the decriminalization of marijuana, right? There's kind of like this pendulum effect, right? Which is that the more lenient the laws get relating to substances, the stricter industries and regulatory bodies get. So it's kind of interesting because it's like, so alcohol, right, has been around forever and people use it and abuse it, right? But the laws relating to alcohol really haven't, or the rules in industries really haven't changed that much, right? Marijuana just became legal and the industry regulations are now going to get stricter. So you got to keep an eye on those things. But it's weird because it's like you don't, if you really think about it, right? The Ohio Department of Aging, whether marijuana is legal or not, right? Whether it was 3 years ago or today, you still don't want marijuana. You still don't want people getting high and treating patients, right? Any way you look at it, the standards should not have changed, but they will because of these rule updates. So the Department of Transportation, same thing, right? And OSHA is going to have specific things to say about marijuana, drug testing, and then you should also, just in general, especially with retail, have training and have policies on what to do when the customer is high, right? When the customer is high. And again, right, it's like, I don't think that there's going to be more people, people were either getting high or they're not, right? I personally, and I could be totally wrong here, but I personally don't think that decriminalizing marijuana is going to get people to smoke more weed, right? I think that they're just going to spend money in different places to get it, right? And I think the state of Ohio is going to make a lot more money because of it, right? But there's a lot of lawyers and practitioners out there that say, you know what? If you're updating your employee handbooks anyway because of everything else I just said, and you're training your employees anyway, well, talk about what to do when the customer is really high. And I don't know. Usually, I think it's alcohol that makes people more belligerent than weed. Like, if a customer walks into a retail store really high, like I like give them a cookie. You know what I mean? Like give them a snack. But you should know that they are going to be less likely to be aware of what they're doing. Okay, so if you are a business that makes whether it's a cultural decision or a safety related decision or a regulatorily required decision to drug test, there are different kinds, right? There's pre-employment, there's post-accident, there's 5 different, there's pre-employment, random, reasonable suspicion, post-accident, return to duty. 6 different kinds of drug testing regimens, right? And they're not mutually exclusive. You can have them overlap. Here's the thing to remember about that. Make sure that it's clearly spelled out in your policies which of those you're doing, how you're going about it, right? And then you absolutely have to apply them consistently across the board. If it's random across the board, it's random. That means management all the way down to the whoever, right? Or if it's just the people around heavy equipment, then it's all the people around heavy equipment, right? Make sure that you're applying it consistently and make sure your policies are clear. All right, here's another knowledge bomb for you guys, okay? If you're a business, here you have insurance. If you don't have insurance, the McGowan folks are here. Raise your hand, McGowan folks. Fantastic insurance agency, right? One of the best in town. Call those guys. They're going to sell you really good insurance. I tell everyone who has more than a few employees, please do me a favor, get employment practices liability insurance, okay? Most people walk around thinking that their general liability policy is going to be there when they get hit with a discrimination claim. It's not. Maybe, small chance it might, but EPLI coverage is what you need, okay? I usually tell my clients to max it out. That and cyber coverage, right? Right. Those two are really hot, and those are things that you just want to have them when you need them, not the other way around. Here's another knowledge bomb for you. As good, as fantastic as the McGowan insurance people are, and as your insurance agent may be, right? I tell every client, and this is not me selling our services, this is me telling you, have a business lawyer read your policy and explain it to you. And then have them read your exclusions that nobody ever reads. Nobody reads their exclusions. Nobody reads their policies. But even if you do, scan through the deck page and scan through the policy, nobody ever reads the exclusions. And I can't tell you how often a client walks in to our office and says, I'm being sued. And we say, do you have insurance? And they say, yeah. And we go, great, we're going to file a claim. And it turns out that the accident happened at a party where alcohol was served. And there's an exclusion in their policy for that, right? Or something else. And you know what else too? You can usually buy a rider for not a lot of money to cover that thing, right? Insurance is like, you're gonna make 3 phone calls when you get sued, right? You're gonna call your lawyer, thank you, your insurance agent, and your spouse, right? In some, I don't know which order, but you're always calling your insurance agent. You're always calling your insurance agent. And so make sure that you've maxed out what you need to max out. The risk assessment really is in your hands. It's in that blue book, right? It'll teach you how to issue spot where you've got the most risk. And then you've got the policies that we've talked about to put in place to minimize your risk. Here's another knowledge bomb for you, okay? The state of Ohio has made a drug deal with you. This, I don't know why, no pun intended. You guys get to take risks as business owners. The state of Ohio and the United States government, in the spirit of capitalism, says, entrepreneurs, you guys are the lifeblood of our economy. We want you going out there and taking risks and putting people to work so that they can pay taxes, so that they can put their kids through college. Go. We will protect you if your risks don't pan out. If your business fails, your house is fine. All you have to do is incorporate, right? File that LLC registration, right? And we will protect your house. We will protect your retirement savings. We will protect all of your personal assets. Here's the drug deal. Number 1, you have to incorporate correctly. Number 2, you have to follow corporate formalities. It's not just about filing something with the Secretary of State. You have to have a shareholder agreement if you have partners. You have to then follow that shareholder agreement, right? If it's an LLC, it's called an operating agreement. If it's a partnership, it's called a partnership agreement. But it is an agreement between the owners and each other, and also the owners and that company. Because it tells the whole world, this company is not me. The company is its own corpus. That's where the word corporation comes from, means body in Latin. Corporation over here, I'm over here. You want to sue the corporation, sue the corporation. My retirement savings and my house and everything else is over here because I have followed corporate formalities respecting the corpus, okay? So shareholder agreements, filing with the Secretary of State. Here's another corporate formality. You have to keep, you can't commingle. Your business assets are your businesses. Your personal assets are over here, separate bank accounts. You can't be using the company like a piggy bank to go on vacations all the time unless you can make a business purpose for it and document that, right? You have to keep really good separate books and records, right? So incorporate, follow corporate formalities, no commingling, and you're not allowed to commit fraud. The LLC will not protect you if you commit fraud, if you use your business to steal, okay? So that's owner protection. And the other thing I will say about that is you have to, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a trust, go get a trust, okay? Entrepreneurs have, they spend their lives building up this enterprise, right? And they've got everything tied up in it. And then you've got this LLC that protects your personal assets from the creditors of the business. If you create a trust and put those your interests and those assets into a trust, that's an LLC and a trust. You have 2 walls between you and a plaintiff. They have to break through 2 separate walls in that fort. A trust also avoids probate, which is very public and takes forever. And you have a lot more flexibility, and there's a lot of tax benefits to having a trust. Every entrepreneur should have a trust. We talked about these other things already.
So 2-minute warning.
Thank you, sir. Steve Shimo is my partner in Cover My Six. So we took this system that's in that book and we put it into a software tool that is coincidentally focused on the cannabis industry. But so Steve is the president of that company and also a fantastic timekeeper. Okay, so they're probably going to deschedule from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3.
Yes.
Okay, which means that instead of being on the same level as like heroin, it's going to be more like steroids. Thank you. Which means that a lot of the rules, well, so number one, it's going to make it easier to bank if you're a cannabis company and easier to get insurance if you're a cannabis company. And all those other rules that, well, A, there's going to be less conflict between state and federal law, and B, like all those rules that you have to follow if you're a federal contractor, a lot of those may become easier to follow. Track what your industry is doing, because as I mentioned, those are changing. Like I always say, you know, your employee handbook, that's a once a year process, right? Case law changes, administrations change, industries issue new regulations. You want to be updating it once a year. You know who you are if you deal with heavy equipment and with patients, but just keep in mind that your role as a business owner is to protect your employees and your customers, right? Among your roles as a business owner. Other places to get information are these three. There's also an Ohio there's a cannabis chamber of commerce in both Ohio and at the federal level. And I think that's all the time I've got.
Hey, if you like this episode, don't forget to comment, like, and share.
This podcast was made possible with the support of our sponsors. Find more ways to grow at Cuyeast.org.